Hey gang, welcome to another episode of Value Added, the real estate podcast. On this week's episode, we're chatting with Austin Linney. Austin is a serial entrepreneur, a real estate investor, and he's also a mindset and business coach. Austin is also the host of Construct Your Life podcast, which you can find on all major platforms. So without further ado, let's get on with the show.
Welcome to Value Added, the real estate podcast where we speak with the brightest minds in the world of real estate who provide, create, and realize value in an ever-changing market. And now your host, Nick Walters.
Tell me a little bit more about that world that you were in and what you've been transitioning into recently.
Yeah, I mean, before that, I've worked in hospitality, high-end, sold wine and high-end liquor and hotels for 20 years, and I was a chef. And then through that bred Airbnb, and then I had multiple properties that I did Airbnb, and then we had a management company all across the United States. Wound up leaving my business partners and losing some money, but learned a lot. And then I moved into private equity. All that time, for like 2 or 3 years, I was kind of like coaching people, I guess. I'll give you the quick version of it. I had a meth addiction and cocaine addiction in my early 20s, and then was homeless for a little while. And then I kicked that habit, and then I was an alcoholic for 20 years. I've been sober, it'll almost be 2 years in like a month, and I've lost like 60 pounds. So a big life transformation. Which handed into the private equity. We were doing commercial development, new construction, fix and flips, but bigger, small development, like 15 unit and below, which really taught me about money and how much people don't know about money and how it works. And then the last 9 months, I'm a high-end performance coach for a lot of investors, some syndicators, people a lot of real estate agents and stuff like that. And then we have the podcast, which is called Construct Your Life. And it's about trying to teach people how to build a lifestyle and not a bank account.
I like that. I want to talk more about the podcast, but how did you end up start coaching your either current or past students? How really did that come about?
In the restaurant business, there's always some guy at the restaurant or the bar that's like Dr. Phil, and that's always been kind of me. And so I was always helping people. Even when I joined masterminds, like masterminds was really my first world into like, that's how I met my first coach that changed my life. And he kept telling me like, dude, like you're almost coaching yourself. Like your skills are like quickly adapting. And then I was helping people in my mastermind, like younger investors. And then I had a guy that I met through there who was like, dude, I need an accountability person. I need somebody to help me, handle my health and all this stuff. Like I'm going to pay you. And I was like, what? Like, no, that's not how, no, I'm going to pay you. Let's go. I'm paying you right now. And so that kind of started it when I was still working private equity. And then when I got laid off, I saw it as an opportunity because I'll be 39 tomorrow, actually. But I saw it as an opportunity to, for once in my life, bet on myself. Like I'll go all in on myself. And here we are. I mean, it's an amazing thing. I have a high-end corporate coach that has been doing it for 15 years. That's kind of guiding me through like the back of the house and the business stuff. But the coaching takeoff has coincided with the podcast. So the podcast was just started in April. And then on Thursday, we've decided, I think we had a call. I talked to a bunch of my friends. I think I'm the fastest one to 100 episodes ever. So 100 episodes is Thursday. So in 8 months, 100 episodes. So I just love it. I'm a conversation relationship guy. It's my thing. Huge networker. And I just meet so many amazing people. And because of my story, I want to give them the platform to share their story. And when somebody that says, I don't have a story, shares it, like this just happened, like literally last night. I had a girl on who's never been on a podcast, who's been sober, and alcoholism run through her family. Well, one of my friends listened to it and has since been 12 days sober because of that. And she saw that. And she's like, oh my God, like I would have never done that. And look what happened. And I'm like, yeah. So that's kind of what the joy I get out of coaching and the podcast stuff.
So your listeners on the podcast and your coaching students that you've worked with now, or maybe in the past, with your struggles with addiction, alcoholism, have you generated business because of somebody may have a similar background to you with their personal struggles, and if so, how is that parlayed into developing a relationship past the the personal struggles that you share with these folks?
I have 3 clients that are in recovery. They went to rehab and they're now getting their real estate license. For me, only in the last 4 months have I leaned into that world, because I find that world to be absolutely depressing. It's fine for recovery people in the real estate entrepreneur space, because we can't stand how they teach them how to survive, but they don't teach them how to thrive. And so people are gravitating towards me as a coach in that space because there's no fluff. I'm not here for your excuses. Like, we're not going to talk about your pity party. We're going to move forward. You don't lose 60 pounds. You don't blow up your life 7 times without, some hard lessons. Right. And so a lot of guys gravitate towards me and maybe they got sober because of 12 steps, but they find it very, negatively toxic moving forward, and they just want to move into a positive space. So I'm working on something right now. I haven't released it yet. It's probably going to come in the next couple of weeks, where it's going to be centered around that space. But it's a hard space, because when you jump into that space, this is way different than closing a real estate transaction. These are people, somewhat fighting for families and fighting for life. So I take that responsibility very seriously. So I want to make sure that I am in a clear headspace to handle all their problems too, because it's no joke. I mean, I have 3 clients that have been in rehab since they were 15. They're now 26 and 23. I mean, it's not a joke. There's a lot of shame with families and wives and stuff. So it's some work for sure. But we focus on the positives and we focus on the daily habits, and then we can kind of get them out of that victim mentality.
What industries do you focus on with your coaching clients? Obviously, there's a real estate component there, but talk to me a little bit about the industries that your coaching clients are involved in.
Yeah, I mean, so just so happens that all of them are in real estate in some aspects, syndicators, so on and so on. But ultimately, we've been looking at that like on a grand scale. And I was talking to one of my mentors. It's like, I'm not like, can I if I flipped houses? Yes. Do I know enough in multifamily to be dangerous? Yes. Do I know private equity? Yes. But what we try to focus on more is like a overall lifestyle coaching. I hate the word life coach. I can't stand it. It makes me sound like I wear flip flops and smoke weed all day. So it's more of like mindset performance. But what we're trying to do is fix your health. We're trying to fix your relationships with your kids, with your wife, and make sure that you put your goals and the things that you're striving for are clearly in focus for you and nobody else. And, a lot of the times I get a lot of guys that come to me with a lot of bravado, and they're like, no, I'm good. I don't need no motivation. I'm crushing it. And I'm like, yeah, but look at all these other aspects of your life that aren't hitting on all cylinders. So, I live by my mentor's thing. There's 6 pillars in life, spirituality, faith, charity, home life, kids, and business. You have to be hitting it on all cylinders. So that's what we're striving for in all of our clients, to make them the best version of themselves.
Is there a common problem that your clients are reaching out for you to solve or for you to help them solve? Is there kind of an overarching theme?
The number one thing I see, and I just released a video from our first mastermind the other day, is self-love. It runs the common thread, but here's the bigger issue: is not only do they not love themselves enough or think they're enough, it's also the stories that they create of the people that are closest to them, of how they view them, right? And what I mean by that is, let's say that I have a coaching client that his family is very successful, degrees wise, right? But, they have many degrees. They're very smart, Harvard educated. He's going in a different route. So he feels like he's the black sheep. But ultimately, the way I look at it is, he's an investor and he has all of his time that is his own. So ultimately, who's going to be the son who's at the family events? It's him, because he's making his own schedule. But in his mind, he's created this thing that I'm not successful because I didn't follow the path that my family did. But if he loved himself enough, he would understand that he's walking in his path. And when you truly walk in your path, it releases you from the burden of these stories that create in your head. And it really can set you free, because the way I describe it is, I played a victim for 20 years myself and blaming myself for my parents' divorce. And I felt like a ball and chain were wrapped around my legs. And the moment I forgave myself and took ownership of that, then I felt like I was flying like an eagle, right? And I think to piggyback on that thought, ownership, extreme ownership in every part of your life. A lot of the addicts or people in real estate, I ask them a simple question. If you went all in, I mean, all in for 6 months, like real estate wise, investment wise, health wise, family wise, name me the positives, right? That would exist. Well, they can name like 30 positives. Okay. Well, name me the negatives if you went all in. They don't have any, because a lot of people are dipping their toe halfway in their job, halfway in their marriage, halfway in as a father. But when you go all in, and one of my favorite quotes in the entire world is, be where your feet are. My client, this conversation right now is the most important thing in my day. And then when I have another one 30 minutes from now, that'll be what I focus on. It's my number one thing I work on, because I'm such a visionary that you want to do all these things. But if you're not handling what's in front of you, then how can you, matriculate down the road?
It's one thing to be a visionary, but it's also a completely different thing to be somebody who can execute. How do you feel about that?
100%, because in my 20s, I talked a lot, right? Like I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But what I was doing is, school didn't really do anything for me, even though I was really smart. And, but I kept like starting something and finishing something. And so the eroding of inner confidence in that like breaks you apart. Right. And that's the number one thing I work on with my clients is like these, and I love Atomic Habits. I think it's one of the best books ever written. I love it. I've read it a couple of times. I make sure all my clients read it, because what you're trying to do is build up this stockpile of small wins. And once you complete these things, that inner confidence keeps going. But something, why do you have people around you that are mentors and that can call you on your crap, right? I had them say this to me, and it really messed me up. He was like, I was riding the car with them on a ride along in Arizona, and he said, you know what I would dream of? He goes, I would dream of that you would never tell me about 2 or 3 things that you're doing or investments that you're doing. And then one day I look up in 6 months and you've executed on everything that you had in your brain, instead of telling me what you're going to do beforehand. He goes, then I would know that Austin is 100% locked in. And that day changed my life. That was January 8th of this year at 3:45 in the afternoon in Chandler, Arizona. I remember exactly, because I sat there dumbfounded and I go, and this is a guy who makes $60K a week. And I'm like, oh, I get it. you want the results, because the results actually mean that stuff's going down. And that's when I started shifting the mindset to just go out and execute, and then leave the talking and the stories up for later on when you're sitting around the campfire.
That's pretty interesting. How did he reach out to you? How did that relationship start?
Oh, so funny story. So I heard him. There's certain people that just jive with me really well. And he came on, he's a big wholesaler, big broker, multiple companies out in Arizona, baller. I mean, like wholesale's like 15 deals a month, like no marketing, no nothing. And he was on the talk of my mastermind with my mentor. And he was just like talking about like, yeah, all this money's great, but life is like whatever, right? And so I was like, I texted my friend. I said, I got to meet this guy. I said, I don't know how. I said, I got to meet this guy. So I DM'd him, and like, I was just like, hey, so we were like having a couple little conversations. And then I was like, hey, I'd love to come around and see how you run so many businesses and you're so put together that you have 3 kids. And he was like, well, you can come like shadow me. And I'm like, sounds great. So I'm like, hey, what day do you have in October? And he's like, this day. And then like 2 weeks before, he's like, I can't, I'm sorry. So he pushes it to November. Then he pushes it to December. Then he's like, hey man, I can't, I'm too busy. So I just bought a plane ticket for January 6th. I sent him a picture of the receipt and I said, I'll see you January 6th at 5 a.m. at the gym. Make it like, and he was like, you're okay. He's like, I'm clearing my schedule. Let's do it. All right. So I flew in for like 24 hours or like something like that. And I met him at the gym at 5 a.m. And so we worked out, and like, I'm so excited. I'm telling him all these things. First time I met him in person. But what I did is I saw on his Instagram that he was a huge Cadillac fan, right? So I went on a vintage car website and I rented a 1964 Cadillac DeVille on 20s, like pimped out for the day. And so I went and picked him up at his brokerage in that car, and he like lost it. He was like, I don't understand what he goes, why did you do this? And I said, because when I leave this meeting, I want you to remember that I was here, because I know how many people DM you, right? And so we had the best day. There was a meetup. Like, he talked about it all day. But I'm going to be honest with you, along with that conversation in the car I talked about, we had another conversation an hour later where we were in a smoothie shop, and I cried. Like, I'm not joking. Like, I think it was the second most important conversation I've ever had in my entire life, because he looked at me and he said, you are massively underutilizing your potential. You're all over the place. He goes, you have debt. You don't really talk about your wife, my ex-wife now. He's like, it just doesn't feel like what you're putting on is real. And he's like, let's get real. Like, what is the stones? What are the steps that we need to take to make you explode, to get you focused, to shift some things, like figure out that, like, is this marriage working for you or is it not, right? And I left that conversation just like, hurt, like, because you're having real conversations. But it was one of those conversations that I will think about for the rest of my life, because somebody cared enough to have an honest conversation. Because I'm very, like, I used to be very loud. And so, like, I'm, kind of aggressive. So sometimes you can kind of like bull over, like, everything's good, like, we're good, don't even worry about it. But when you get around people that you truly respect and truly look up to, and they're willing to ask the tough questions, to care, those conversations can change your life. And that was 45 minutes, and who cares if I spent, $450 to come down there? Like, who cares? Like, how do you put a price tag on that? Like, now that I'm saying it, I haven't talked about that day in a while. Like, that's a self-defining day right there, and moreover, what I haven't even mentioned is at the mastermind, I met like 7 investors that I've done business with since then too. So, I mean, there's like so many things I could talk about,
The difficult questions, do you have a hard time asking those to your clients?
No, not at all. I like to get up in their kitchen, and that's why they hire me. And I think as a coach, it is your job. Like, if I didn't, then what are we doing here, right? And the thing is like, I'll call it, but here's the most important thing. And I was just telling somebody this yesterday. as a coach, I have to lead by example. There's no off days for me. Like I'm doing 75 hard right now. I got up this morning at 4:20 in the morning, got both my workouts in before 6 a.m. They see it on Instagram all the time. Coach is getting it. We know he's after it. So when you take on that role, you have to take on that responsibility and that burden. And if I didn't ask them the questions, then I wouldn't be doing my job, because we're not here to fluff. Like they're here because they want to get better and they want to do better. Now, are some conversations where they're in a bad mood or they're in a thing? It's tough. It's very tough. But that's why they got me, because by no stretch of the imagination am I David Goggins. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm so invested in their journey that if it gets out, if like let's say you had a bad couple weeks, right? Like and you were in the Austin area or whatever you were, I'm gonna be at your house at 4 a.m. and we'll work out together for like 3 days in a row to get you back on track. Because what I told somebody yesterday is your name and your abilities and how you perform is on my name. So I'm not going to let my name, be sullied, because all I have is my name. So if I'm not executing as a coach, but I think this is something that's very important, because I have a coach too, who's prolific in sales, right? Prolific in CRMs and all that stuff. If I can't give you what you need, I'm going to find you the coach that can, right? There's a lot of people that have a different personality than me, let's say a quieter, more cerebral personality. Like I might not work for them as a coach, but I know coaches that will, that are a little more like, cerebral and like, so I think you have to understand that you can't help everybody, but you can attract the people that you need as a coach. And then they have friends that need coaching too. So, you just make sure that you're servicing your people in front of you,
Cool. Yeah, all very good points. We're going to close out this episode with the hard-hitting questions. These are the questions that we ask every one of our listeners.
Sure.
First off, I always like to ask is, what is your why?
So my why is bigger than most, is I want to lift up everybody around me. And the reason that is because I can't be done with that ever. And, I want to make everybody that comes in contact with me feel a little bit better. And if I do that, and at the end of every day, I know I can put my head on the pillow and feel good about the day.
How do you like to pay it forward?
Dude, I got a new thing I'm doing. It's my favorite thing by a mile. So I'm finding investors that are friends of mine. Their kids are entrepreneurs. And I'm buying them like Rich Kid, Poor Kid books. I'm just sending it to them. And then my friend runs he's a sneaker. Get this, he flips vintage sneakers to buy real estate. He's been doing it for like 15 years. So I pay for their first month to be in his little like group, his mastermind group for kids. But I make them go work with their parents to get $25 to bring somebody else in the group. That's my favorite thing I'm doing right now. I
like that.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Lastly, tell the listeners a little bit more about your podcast and the story behind that.
So the genesis to the podcast was, I love a lot of things. I love travel. I love so many things. And so I wanted to make sure that I talked about investing, but I didn't like put myself in a hole. So I came up with the idea of like, how would you construct a perfect life? And, one of my mentors a couple years ago said, you're so worried about the dollar amount. You need to learn about creating a lifestyle, not a bank account. And I was like, oh, that's it. That's it. And so if we're building a lifestyle not predicated on a diet or a dollar amount or a thing that we need, then we can live it every day. And it's our default. And so, I've had people that own Airbnbs in Costa Rica that are my friends. I've had real estate investors, people that have overcome drug addictions. I've had high-end syndicators, so many things. And I'm obsessed with health and wellness. So, we're just trying to bring on all those guests. So, we started in April 6th, right after, COVID kind of started. I went to Best Conference Ever in late February, and that was kind of the genesis, because what I realized is everybody that had podcasts, those were the people that were walking up. They were walking up to that people. And I was like, I've wanted this for like 2 years. And one of my buddies, Tyler Chester, was like, just do it, dude. And so I used to work in the music business for briefly as a road manager, and the bass player had a podcast company. And I was like, let's do this, dude. Like, let's just go record some episodes. And then we recorded, and it's kind of just like taken off. And I love it so much. And everybody loves the name. They're like, dude, like you must have spent like a month thinking about that. And I'm like, well, it was like 11 o'clock at night to like a couple texts, and we got it working. I try not to focus so much on the details and just kind of let the business drive the scaling. Right. And I think that's kind of been the way I like to play it.
And what's the full name of the podcast again?
It's called Construct Your Life Podcast.
Perfect. I'll make sure I add that in the show notes. Lastly, how can our listeners get a hold of you and learn a little bit more about you?
Sure. On Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn, Austin Linney, Linney. If you DM me, I'm going to answer, and I might even jump on a call with you. Some young kids have reached out to me, and they're like, I didn't expect you to call. And I'm like, no, let's get this. Let's knock it out. Because I don't know about you, Nick, but I am blown away by these young kids these days that are like 18 and 19 and already rocking and rolling in real estate. And I'm like, if I had the opportunities they did and knew what I do now, man, it blows me away to help these young kids. And so that's the way to get a hold of me. I'd love to connect with everybody, see how I can help anybody.
That's great. Hey, listen, thank you so much for the time. It was great to get to know you a little bit more. And thanks so much for adding your value today.
I appreciate you. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to leave a rating and a review, which will help us introduce the podcast to other listeners. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which will give you access to other episodes you may have missed. Lastly, if you'd like to learn more about investing alongside us, then head on over to valueaddedpodcast.com. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you next week.